Yeah, Rebecca.
What I was going to mention is that the experience I've had, the first material I wanted to publish that I checked with other companies was my Reading Mallet percussion music book, because I'd never published a book at that point. I had done some sheet music, but that was it. And of course, for distribution and getting it out there. And I found out a lot of people, everybody wanted to see it because they wanted to know what was in it. But nobody wanted to publish it because they had things that competed with that kind of material. Some of them directly. So I ended up, because I had I had already had a lot of business experience from doing the timpani and stuff. So I thought, well, I can, there's not a big difference between getting a supplier to make you a tuning lug or having a print company print up a book. Business-wise, and finding the people to do it is pretty similar, and the planning and the pricing, all that stuff. So I decided I would just do it myself. And it's because it didn't fit into anybody else's niche, and nobody really was that interested in my ideas. It was very different from the other books that were available at that time about reading, which weren't very many of them. So that's why I started publishing my own books. And I had created a company for it. It was a business. It was a sole proprietor business at that point. But by keeping the copyright on both sides, I get, if there is something that there's a performance royalty from, like one of my sheet music, I get the publisher's portion and the composer's portion. And if I perform it, anyway, so I also had the experience of, this is somebody else's experience that I can relate to you. And it's a danger with a publishing company when you sign a contract where you sell basically your copyright to them. Bill Mersch, and I don't think he would mind me talking about this, he recorded a CD called The Modern Marimba, and it was done by a small, like, new music company, I don't know, back in the late 80s, early 90s, something like that. I forget the name of it. Owned the copyright to it and produced it. And then that company was bought out by Sony in one of those giant, corporate, takeovers of other companies. And they just decided that it didn't fit their program, so they just deep sixed it. And he was never able to get his work back and out, and it's still dead. It's gone.
Yeah, from what I understand, he's actually thought about re-recording those pieces just so he could release it.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that's pretty painful after 25 or 30 years to go back and revisit stuff like that.
Newport
but yeah,
Classic.
so yeah, Newport Classic. So when you that's the other reason that I did my own work, is so that somebody couldn't, like, stop having it out there. Mm-hmm. They could just decide, we don't need this, it's just sinks down in the catalog. They run out. They don't want to print more of them, and it's gone.
Ben, did we ever ask him about the cover when he was on? Like, if he's going to redo it, can we?
I don't think we did, but yeah, the CD Rebecca's referring to is called The Modern Marimba, New Music for an Ancient Instrument, and it has a very, very 1980s cover.
Sorry, I would just go back to answering Nazdi's question. I think it's just really important. It's a good thing to think about the process of deciding a publisher, your own publication, which type of publisher, and like what you said, Jim Campbell told you, Brian, is similar to what Kevin Bobo told me when I was getting ready to, consider publication. And he's like, well, don't just send off to random publishers, like research what they do, the type of music that they like to publish, and why, and how does your music fit into that, and choose one and send it there first. Don't send the piece to 3 publishers,
yes.
And see if anybody wants to take it up, because it's a small world too. And then and people talk, and all those publishing guys in the percussion world, they know each other. They hang out at conferences, so it just seems a little I don't know. It's not the greatest idea to just like send out to a bunch of stuff and or a bunch of different people. But for me, it was I had known Jim Casella a tiny bit when when I was an undergrad in grad school, and I played a few of their pieces. So for me, it was send off to Tap Space and see what they think. I just like the way that their attention to details and their aesthetic and all of that, and that appealed to me. And in the type of music, like we were talking about, that they do a lot of stuff and they get things out well, and that has worked out. I've also published with Kevin Bobo's company. He had a couple other guys called Perk Master.
Yep.
And I like that because they let you retain the copyright.
Mm-hmm.
That was their deal. Unfortunately, the three guys that were working together on that just never could put enough time and energy into it to market and to get things out as much as they wanted. And so it has kind of dissolved in the past year or so. But I like the idea of that, retaining your copyright. That was his big thing that kind of sold me on that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool though now, because they have dissolved, I still have the copyright to the one piece that they had published, and now I actually sent that to Tap Space, and they're gonna re-release it.
Nice.
So now I won't own the copyright to that piece anymore, but it's cool that I still did that. I had that option.
Sure.
To do that. And then I did a few indoor drumline shows with Drop 6, which is now controlled by Roloff, because they were in that, the marching. Drop 6 did a lot of the marching arrangement stuff too.
Right.
So I'm not going to send that to, C. Allen or something like that. So anyway, yeah, just thinking about what you have and what the publishers do and whether it's worth it. I kind of regret sending some of those to Drop 6 because they sold them for so little. Like if you get online and look and you buy a pre-written indoor drumline show, you're going to pay anywhere from $500 or $600 to $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 for like a pre-written show, and they were selling it for $80. I was like, oof, dang it.
Yikes.
Roloff has, I think they sell it now that they control it. I think it's like twice that.
Right.
And they're not that good. I mean, at this point, they're probably worth $100 or less. So I don't really care. It's long gone. But all the marching stuff, I just retain that. I don't see a point in publishing that with a established publisher. I just sell that myself.
Right. Well, something that, of course, goes along with this that we've touched on, but I don't think really answered specifically. We have a question from Facebook, and it's from Sean Olson. And Sean, thanks so much for asking this, because I've heard this question a lot of times over the years, and it seems to be kind of a fundamental concern that people who aren't in this yet wonder, and it's, how do you go about self-publishing and copyright issues to make sure your music is protected by copyright laws? Does anyone want to bite on that first?
I'm just winging it and hoping it works out.
Just hoping nobody.
Well, I could say a couple quick things, because I did this concerning my I recorded a solo album in 2012, and I looked up a lot about the copyright. I was learning a lot about it then as a self-published album. I didn't work with anyone on that, and so I mean the basic rule is once it's produced, it's covered by law as it's a copyrighted piece of work. It's yours. No one, legally, no one else can have it. But in order to have the fullest protection of the law, like if you actually wanted to sue somebody and you wanted it to go well in court, it's best to register things with the U.S. Copyright Office. So I did register that album. Anything else I've like self-published. I've done a few other pieces and stuff. I've never registered those things. I think there's a small cost associated with that. I can't remember for a registration fee or something. But anyway, so that's the short answer. It's like as soon as your work is done, it's copyrighted officially, legally. It's yours. But if you want the fuller protection to make things go better or go easier, then you have to register.
Yeah, it's yours, but the risk is proving it. It's like, yes, it's yours, but now when it comes time to you need to prove it. I've always said I feel like our field is so small and there's so little to gain. Like if I steal a piece of Caleb's and try to, go call it my own, the risk is not worth what I stand to make, probably. And I feel like our field is it's just such a tight little field, like everyone would know. And I don't know. Yeah, I feel like we're kind of just protected by the sheer nature of our no one's out here to like make huge giant bucks as far as I know. Maybe some people are. You could always do the old poor man's copyright. There's something called the poor man's copyright, which is you write a piece or you write something that is your intellectual property, you put it in an envelope and you mail it to yourself, and then when it arrives it's sealed and it has a postmark and a date on it, and then you simply don't open it. You leave it in a drawer, and you leave it in a drawer till you need to prove it's yours someday, and then you can prove you wrote it first. I mean, it's a very old idea. I don't know if it would still stand up or not. It's like probably could fabricate that now, but
well, I'd be curious too. Even just like for me, I'll sketch maybe on manuscript paper, but the minute I'm going to really sit down and start writing a piece, I'm in Sibelius, and so I have to wonder if the the date of creation of the file and stuff like that is going to be pretty obvious. That I created it on this day. If 5 years later you're trying to do something that I had already done, like I wonder if that type of thing would stand up in court. Because I'm with you, Brian. Like most of myself, I haven't bothered to. I've gone based on the minute it was created, it's copyrighted. So I haven't bothered with any of the Library of Congress or anything like that. So I would imagine, and I think you're right, Casey. Our world is so small. It would, and I also make sure that I'm usually, when I'm writing something, I'm sending it to 2 or 3 other people to just kind of get opinions. So it would be relatively easy to say, hey, do you remember when I wrote this and how it sounds, if I needed to, I guess.
Yeah. You should just have a stamp, like a security stamp, like this is protected by the Union of Copyright Lawyers. It's total fake, just to scare people. Might work. Maybe, I don't know. Rebecca, I think you had something to add here.
I did. There aren't the copyright police. There is no, if you own the copyright and somebody infringes on that, it's all on you to take any kind of legal action to stop it, or to claim, if it becomes, like a mega seller, to claim that your musical idea was stolen. So I think for ASCAP and BMI, probably, if you have things you've registered with them, I register mine. I register my books with Library of Congress through copyright. So I make sure I cover that, because I want that for my work, and I think it's important. But in actual practicality, for copyright infringement is a very difficult thing to prove. And, it's not, I think in our world, especially in the educational world, it's not really something we need to worry very much about. But I think in terms of respecting your work, if you're creating a body of work as an artist, it does help create a record, and it creates a permanent record that you did that work. And for me personally, it's worth it as a good business practice to register everything.
Sure.
Err on the safe side, right? But you have to, if somebody infringed on your copyright, you would be looking at thousands. If you just want to take them, even just to get a cease and desist letter from a lawyer, it probably costs you at least $500 to get that from a lawyer, to take care of that, to tell them to stop. And if you felt like there was financial infringement, like maybe, the DCI #1 winner this year stole your ideas for their music, and you really wanted to get, some kind of compensation, or not, that became really important, you'd probably be spending, $5,000 or $10,000 in legal fees or more. And it'd be really hard to prove it,
Yep.
So but I think there's multiple reasons for taking that copyright seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it'd be safe, huh? What do you got, Caleb?
Does anybody have any thoughts or insight on this whole idea of educational fair use? I feel like we really stretch that in the music world of, like, I have this method book. Oh, by the way, I've been copying it 5 times a month for the past 10 years to give out to my students so they don't have to buy it. So I don't know if anyone has any.
That is not fair use. I can
That
say
is
that.
not. Yeah, that is not fair use.
I did some research recently on it a little further. I mean, I've read it stuff about that a bunch of times over the years, but I was trying to put together a like kind of a copyright do's and don'ts to just post around our music department because we're trying to tell the students and model to the students the right way to do things. But it's like when you actually start reading it, you're like, oh crap, we're totally not abiding by all of the details of the law. Like even as a department, I know that there are some of us in the faculty that are like copying things that we probably shouldn't be and stuff like that. So yes, you're absolutely right, Caleb. I think we way overstretch that and commonly, unfortunately.
It seems like it's one of those things that, like, it's like Rebecca said, if someone's doing it and apparently a lot of people are doing it, yeah, I mean, it's on them to go after everybody, and going after someone is really, really hard, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I think institutions like schools have organizations have gone after them. And there's, where I lived in Virginia, where I was pretty involved working with some of the public school students. And the school district that I was in is very, very on top of that you can't just photocopy music and hand stuff out to your students.
Yeah.
It's prohibited, and they have to have original copies of music at solo and ensemble contest. I mean, they might have 1 or 2 books and they share it, but there has to be original copies of the music. And for the some of the schools had percussion classes, they would buy a classroom set of my books, the reading books. They wouldn't buy one book and photocopy it for everybody. So, and I think there's some colleges and universities that are really strict in a similar way. I think I was up in Fredonia, New York, the State Universities of New York. So there are places where it's taken very seriously.
Yeah. Caleb, just so you know, Copyright: The Complete Guide for Music Educators by Jay Althouse is a great book that was written a while ago, but has been updated a little bit, but it covers all the fair use stuff and kind of gives you scenarios of what is really fair use and what's not, and it's pretty clear about those things. So, and it's really cheap. I think the price on this is $10.95, and you can get it on Amazon for probably even cheaper. So,
or you can find it on as a PDF for free somewhere.
Or you probably find it as a PDF for free.
Vulture.com.
Yeah.
And Brian Bloom just put up the NAFME copyright. Yeah, that's another really great one as
Good
well.
resource.
And I think J.W. Pepper has one up as well on their web. So there's a lot of resources out there that show you exactly what fair use is and where because there are some levels of it that are really crazy, especially for us. For example, my understanding is like for all the copying that we as percussionists do when we have to go from stand to stand to stand to stand, that's illegal.
Correct.
And it's
without permission.
Yeah, you need permission. And so this book actually goes into the fact that like the copyright laws in general are always behind the times. Technology goes so fast that then it takes forever for the laws to actually catch up, to actually be able to enforce certain things. But so the copyright laws that we deal with are like so antiquated in a lot of ways, and quite honestly unrealistic to a point. And I have to wonder to a degree if like things like for all of us that use iPads now, that we scan our piece in, that we bought the sheet music for and scan it in, I wonder if that's actually technically illegal for us to do. I'm not exactly sure. So there's a lot of weirdness about that, but books like this and the NAFME stuff is pretty clear, at least on what fair use is in a lot of ways.
Yeah, abandon all hope. We should all be orthodontists. Yeah, just be a dentist. That's the answer. Caleb, our instructor in the music industry program, Joe Taylor, he gave that nice talk on copyright for the department, and I remember him distinctly saying, like, fair use, you might as well just pretend it doesn't exist, because it's just, if you want to be safe, because you have to convince them that it was fair use. And it seems like it's just densely complicated. Marco, I think you were going to bring up something new.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if like people think about this question the same way I do, or if people find it like as fun as I do. But knowing a lot of percussion composers, we have a field where I feel like so many more people compose than people that play other instruments. It might be the nature of us being able to just improvise on our instruments so easily, so early on. It seems like everyone like wrote a marimba solo at some point when they were in high school or undergrad, and then obviously a lot of people that take it more seriously. But I think with that also, at least in my case, and I think a lot of others, that leads to those of us who end up, doing this on a professional level, maybe releasing or publishing pieces really early on that end up being way different than, your sort of more mature compositions once you actually figure out what you're doing. And I know like Gordon Stout, someone very near and dear to me, would always talk about how he hates that people play Mexican dances so often because he's written so much other music that's like really good. Mm-hmm. And everyone just knows the Mexican dances, even though he's written like 200 pieces. And then like I know with like Kevin Bobo, like before I got to know him, I only knew about Gordon's Bicycle and Rhythmic Jambalaya, which are he's written so much great music that are not those pieces, and like I guess there's probably like maybe one of my older pieces would fall into that category. And I was just curious, like with Casey, before I got to know you and your music, Casey, literally the only piece of yours that I knew was White Knuckle Stroll, and again It's like very different than a lot of the other pieces that you've written in so many ways. And Brian, I don't know if you would, but like for me, it was Unforced Rhythms. I heard people play Unforced Rhythms all the time, and I like didn't even know that you wrote other pieces until I got to, you know what I mean? I was just curious if you guys like, had any pieces like that you realized like for yourself. Like I just think it's kind of a funny thing to think about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know through this podcast, I've learned even like Alejandro Viñao, like discovering his other music or doing a deeper dive into Gordon Stout's other music. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. Like, man, Alejandro Viñao's coolest music is his vocal music. It's like vocal and electronic stuff is so cool. It's just totally different. And we said this on the last episode talking about Michael Kograss, who recently passed away. It's so interesting to learn about him through his snare drum solo first. It's like that's all Michael Kograss was to me for like well over a decade. That's just who he was when I was a kid, and that's all I knew about him. And then you discover when you just give them another medium, they are just like they're a totally different composer. When I teach that or when I used to teach that music caprice class, that was always my Mozart go-to Mozart comment, is like he composed equally well regardless of the medium. It's like he had the same chops at opera that he had at piano sonata and like at string quartet. It's like the medium affects most of us, I think, so much. It certainly affects me just so much. So it's it's an interesting thing.
I wonder if this is changing though a little bit now in this culture of like Marco that you brought up, like this YouTube culture, because the reality is, okay, you find out about Gordon Stout's Mexican dances 20, 30 years ago, then it was, okay, well, I guess I got to go to the library, or I got to find, I've got to track down other sheet music. And then, maybe I'll find a recording. Maybe I guess I need to learn this stack of pieces myself so I can see what's cool and what's not. Versus now, you can just literally just type in Gordon Stout marimba into YouTube, and you're going to get a million Mexican dances, but you're also going to get so many other pieces at this point. So I wonder if that is slowly but surely changing just as we have such an onslaught of information at our fingertips.
But you have to be willing to search that information, and some young folks stop at the one that has the most views.
Catching Shadows by Ivan Trevino.
Well, and that's true, but I also think that there's a lot of how many of us have been up till 2 a.m. on YouTube because you started down a rabbit hole of drum set videos, which turned into, who's this guy Jojo Mayer? Oh, well, he's got a band nerd, and then the next thing you know, it's 2 a.m. and you've been watching videos for 3 or 4 hours straight. So I hear what you're saying, Brian, absolutely, but I think that kind of that culture, because it's so accessible now, I would hope at least it's starting to change a little.
Mm-hmm. I can make a grumpy old man comment of it. I sometimes feel like a lot of young people, there's something new. They just say, just tell me what to play. Like, I feel like a lot of people have lost perspective on, it's like there's so much out there that, I don't know, maybe it's harder to get grabbed by certain things, you know, because there's so much great stuff. It's yeah, like you're just kind of in this I don't know, like you're in this constant like orbit of like amazing stuff everywhere that it just kind of turns the volume down on the whole. Like you just don't get mystified as easily, maybe. I don't know. Rebecca, I think you have something.
I did, and and I also have something, a second thing, a reaction to what you just said. The first thing I was going to say is that, for example, the Michael Colgrass and the Gordon Stout, we've only had YouTube, has it been 10 years?
Almost 15,
15?
but
just a little more, yeah.
So,
not long.
So for a lot of people, and especially young people, nothing before that existed. And I think that's a huge problem. And for example, like most of Gordon's music, of those 200 pieces, I'd imagine at least 150 of them were written before 15 years ago, and the other ones, and nobody's put them on YouTube. And for me personally, I'm working on trying to figure out how to get my music into video, getting into the video format. Because I've gone through now a couple of different iterations of, first I have to have a website back in the 90s, and so it's hard to keep up. And it's probably going to be hard for you guys to keep up too. But the second thing about all of the information coming from social media and from YouTube, instead of actually looking at sheet music and hearing it in your mind and studying it and thinking about it, or maybe having a much slower, deeper approach to figuring out what music to play, which is most of my career was in that time period. I mean, I didn't have recordings. I learned most of the marimba pieces I played from like a manuscript from the composer. I mean, can you imagine somebody looking at a pencil manuscript? Maybe you've not looked at them, but a pencil manuscript as opposed to something that came out of Finale or Sibelius. I mean, anyway, when the things that are attractive, besides the number, even for lots of views, the things that are attractive on social media and the internet are things that are flashy and immediately engaging, because there's a necessity in the first 2 or 3 seconds, maybe the first 5 seconds, or else people will just go to something else. I mean, I do the same thing. If I'm not interested, if the introduction of a logo or something takes 10 seconds on a video, I just say, and click something else unless it's something I really, really want to see. But when young people are looking for things that are flashy, there are other things about music and about our art that require depth and require thinking and a little bit of introspection and consideration of a lot of different kinds of things and depth in performance. And even in like playing the snare drum piece by Michael Colgrass, there's a lot you can do with that musically. And the thing that worries me as a teacher and an artist who's lived through a totally different kind of experience is I feel like that kind of engagement for young people I'm worried that that's going away. And how can we get that back? That things are so competitive now. Competitions are so important now, as opposed to just listening and getting it right, playing exactly what's on the page and being, the time is metronomic, instead of just kind of listening to a more organic way of music making. So I don't know if you all think about these things or not. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, you mentioned trying to transfer your music to video. I know we've talked on this show about, like, is that even relevant anymore? I know some of our colleagues and some of my students, they say like, man, should I even upload to YouTube anymore? I'll make this, they'll make this killer production and what I think is a great piece, and a year goes by, they've got 120 views, and it's like, yeah, if we've asked the question a couple times now, like, if you miss the wave, is it worth still getting on it, and I don't know the answer. I really don't. I mean, I think my recommendation is no, you should do it, because I think, like Marco said, if you're missing, that is a big deal. Maybe it doesn't automatically, everyone notices it, but when they do look you up, they need to find you. They need to know what you do. They need to, yeah, it's like if you don't have that up there, then you basically don't exist, that saying.
Now, I feel like humans are naturally impatient, and so much of the innovation that's happened throughout history has really been to bring more instant satisfaction to people. Like we invented like cooking so that we could like eat better food, and to the point where like, this now everyone can afford cars, more instant satisfaction because you can get places faster. And now that's brought all the way down to, obviously we can all fill in the blanks in many aspects of life. But now, we have dating apps where you swipe left and right, and then you get on YouTube, and it's like we're so used to this instant satisfaction of this video is entertaining for 3 minutes and then it's over, that it's almost taken away for a lot of people realizing the incentive of devoting time to something and gaining a deeper understanding, and understanding that could give you a deeper enjoyment of something like that. And when I get freshmen in music school that, they like music, but they haven't necessarily been exposed at all to like concert music, they've never listened to a symphony and they don't want to. And it's like there's so much, I guess, learning that really has to happen before. It's almost like you have to develop a way to understand how that's enjoyable. And so I really love listening to Bartok, and so many of like maybe my freshmen come in, I play them some Bartok and they don't feel the same way about it. And then I think back, like there is so much that has gone into me enjoying Bartok other than just listening to it for the first time and enjoying it. And I think that's a thing that we're seeing everywhere, including with this whole YouTube phenomenon where the video has to be exciting from minute number one.
I've had a lot of success, Marco, with if we're going to listen to something in studio class, I notice it can go really, really well if I've got just like a good recording and everyone has a score in front of them. They like everyone is really, really engaged. Like I feel like we're doing that thing that you mentioned. Like we're doing that thing I used to do. But you know what I mean? Like I feel like we really do get that experience. And every time we've done that, there's never been a piece that I've shared with them that they're not buzzing about afterwards.
Sure.
Unless I don't know, Caleb, maybe in the practice rooms behind the scenes, they're like, man, that crusty old Angelosi, I don't care about Ravel. But we
experienced very similar things teaching music appreciation to non-majors. Many of them have no musical experience whatsoever. And I can still, get some people to enjoy, a piece by Beethoven after I give them all of the sort of personally relatable background information. But then it's not standing up on its musical merits alone. It's standing up on, the more relatable human element and not just compositional technique and whatnot. But, I do understand that you can give the outside help sort of to make it more enjoyable. But I think the bottom line is being able to instill that drive to want to delve into it yourself. And that's really tough to just completely change the way that someone approaches their entire life.
I kind of have two thoughts on this. I actually talked to a friend I haven't talked to in a few years. He called me yesterday just to chat. He ended up teaching a camp with a dude that did WPG, and then it just kind of evolved, and he was just checking to see what I was up to. But yeah, he was talking about his students, and it's a pretty good school in Texas. But he was just like, they're just not as hungry as I remember being like in high school and undergrad. He's like, there's the few of them that I've had this discussion with a lot of people. It seems like I don't want to do I'm the old man thing. I can't do that yet. I need like 30 more years. But yeah, it seems like Marco was talking about instant gratification. It's like, I feel like younger students just aren't as like hungry to like get after it. Like, I mean, yeah, you really do have to not just say this is cool, but this is cool, this is why it's cool. Okay, now sit down, we're going to go through this together. I'm going to kind of force you to see why this is cool. And then when they come out the other side, more often they get it.
Yeah,
but it's cool. Hard to get them to like plug in the first spot.
Yeah. And it's not just in music. I mean, you see it in like video games too. Like I like to play JRPGs that take 75 hours. And that's like an unpopular genre, at least now in this part of the world. And people play Fortnite, you know? And it's the same. I mean, not the same. I'm not going to talk down on Fortnite because it's a great game. I don't like it. But you play the 100-person battle. It takes like 10 minutes tops. And then you do the same 100-person battle again over and over and over and over. And there's never a dull moment. So you're never building up to like a greater like level of enjoyment. It's just like the same reliable level of enjoyment right from the beginning every single time, which I guess I can understand on a completely logical level why that would be something that becomes popular. But for me, it's always been like that process of grinding away for 80 hours and achieving something bigger is really awesome, as long as you can get yourself to enjoy the process.
But I think to a point, isn't that kind of maybe our role as teachers, though, is to take that student and show them, okay, I understand you don't like Beethoven, but check out, here's the things that I'm listening for. There was a faculty member, like one in my old school, that taught like a listening to jazz class. And I was like, man, how useful would that have been? Because for the longest time, listening to jazz to me was just like, I have no idea what's going on. I just hear a lot of notes going by, what's happening and stuff like that. But to say, well, listen, here's why Coltrane sounds the way he does, and here's why Miles Davis sounds the way he does, and listen to why that's happening. Like, I think that's our, maybe it's unpopular or maybe I'm wrong, but our role as a teacher is to be that person that, especially the people that are looking at trying to do this as a career, and saying, okay, I get that you don't like classical music, or you don't like jazz, or you don't like concert, or like whatever, but here's why this is cool, and try and motivate them to go through that door.
Sure. Could I respond real quick? Is that okay?
No.
I don't
Sure.
want to step on this. But basically, I do agree with you on that, and that's a thing that obviously we need to work on with students at times. But I think there's a fundamental issue, I'm not going to say a fundamental change in society that's causing that. And I mean, I know Caleb and I are the two youngest here, I think, but I think we both still grew up without smartphones. Until I didn't have a smartphone until I was graduating college. And so that sort of culture of instant gratification wasn't there yet. And so, even being on the younger side, I was never at a point where that investment in your enjoyment was a foreign concept. That's just all I ever knew right from the very beginning. And then I saw the instant gratification sort of element as just like a little bonus once in a while, once that became a thing. And so I agree with you, but I think that there is a deeper condition other than just them having to be taught.
Agreed. Casey, it looks like you have. Oh wait, Rebecca. I think you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I had something that I believe about teaching, and I'm really interested in your perspective on it. And I agree with Marco. This is not addressing what he said about the instant gratification, smartphone generation, but that can kind of affect us. But I think even before, or what I've come to this over my teaching career, and especially working with young people who are, say, middle school age, especially almost adolescent. I guess they have to be, well, some elementary school kids can do it, but sometimes I think about what is the core thing that I do as a teacher that this student really needs to learn. And sometimes I feel like I'm teaching all my students the same lesson, and that it really is cross subject. And what I'm teaching them is that they can, if they work hard on the bits and pieces of something, they can, over a period of time, like a few months or a year or 2 years, and they can look at these, by putting this together, they can learn how to achieve something or know something or learn about something or master something that they could never do in just a few months or a few weeks, but that over it's a long sustained project. It's a long sustained project to go from I'm just learning to pick up my mallets in October for 4 mallets at solo and ensemble, I played Rain Dance, and I got a first on it. And when a kid can do that and maintain their motivation to do the work involved in that, and they do it, and I don't lead them through it, how, we all can do that with a student to a certain extent. But when it starts to come from them and they really grab onto that idea and they really want to do it, and then they come out the other end of that, that's something that you never forget. And that I'm sure all of us in this conversation had those experiences when we were younger, and that's why we're doing what we do right now, is teaching. But I feel like that's the lesson, and that's what I want to present my students with, where they make decisions, they figure out how to play their piece. I do my best never to tell my students what to do, but to show them or present them and explain how they could do something like maybe what I demonstrated. So they own it, and then this is the same way, this kind of idea or concept, the same thing is behind a research project, or writing a research paper, or building a model airplane, or doing model rocketry, or baking a cake. But that's what I feel like I'm teaching and trying to get my students to do. So when they can get that experience the first time, then they become able more to teach themselves. What do you all think of that?
Well, fun fact about baking a cake: we have the technology. This is relevant, but yeah. Fun fact about baking a cake, and I apologize if you've heard this on the show already, but they have the technology to make it just mix and milk or mix and water, but apparently people weren't satisfied with the cakes they were making, so they made it so you had to add eggs, and apparently adding eggs was just enough effort that people felt like they made the cake and that it wasn't just an out of the box thing. So it's total marketing that you add eggs to your Betty Crocker cakes or whatever. So yeah, there is something to be said about that, like feeling like you're doing it. But I love what you're saying, Rebecca, and people should really listen up, because you've got an amazing track record of great students. And I know, just being here in Virginia for a short time while you were here, I saw several of them at the summer band camps here, and students who knew Rebecca Kite. So it's just, gonna miss having you in the area, of course, but yeah, you know what you're talking about. So yeah, people should really pay attention. I was just going to mention 2 little books. One, Brian Bloom, who just took off, gave me, which is Peak. And this is, of course, it's called The Secrets from New Science of Expertise. And it's by Anders Ericsson and a guy named Robert Poole. And Anders Ericsson is really the person that started this whole research about like the 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell hijacked and blah, 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 blah. But my favorite explanation for this concept is this Angela Duckworth's grit. And yeah, I think she explains it very well. And that's my favorite word. It's that intrinsic motivation that Marco's talking about. It's not anyone lacking information. It's just that like hunger or like need or thirst to just like go and do it. And I like the word grit for it, because I think it's the most useful description in my opinion, because it's not always fun and it doesn't always feel good, and you have to like kind of get nasty with yourself sometimes to like get stuff done, and it's this inner battle, and it's this. So I don't know if you guys are interested in this topic. Those are 2 books that I think are really popular and a lot of people are talking about. Do you guys want to know what happened this day in music history?
No.
Yeah.
You done, Caleb?
I just knew you.
This round table.
I was gonna say yes. I just
waiting
wanted to
for a lull.
We should do like last man standing. It's been about an hour and 45 minutes. We should do last man standing gets an award or something.
I have 3 weeks until I have any contractual obligations. So
you think you can hang in here for 3 weeks?
My gaming PC is right here. So
he's been playing Darkest Dungeon the whole time.
Marco, when you've been doing these week after week, like old Caleb has, you get worn down. It's like your tolerance. But anyway, well, if anyone wants to hang in there, I want to tell you what has happened today in history. So we're releasing on August 15th. So a couple cool birthdays. One of them in 1875. This is the birth date of English composer, someone you may not have heard of, named Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, not to be confused with English poet and philosopher and theologian Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Exactly the same name, spelled exactly the same way, just the middle and last name flipped. So composer Samuel Coleridge-Taylor was one of Britain's most celebrated young composers, and even Edward Elgar said of him, far and away the cleverest fellow amongst young men. So Coleridge-Taylor sought to draw from traditional African music and integrate it into classical tradition, very much the same way he considered Brahms to do with Hungarian music and Dvorak to do with Bohemian music. Coleridge-Taylor's most famous work is a choral trilogy titled Hiawatha. Yeah. And this piece made him famous overnight. And the quote is, "This funny, generous, and modest young man, a worldwide sensation overnight," because of that piece. He was received by the White House here in the States and was referred to by the white musicians of New York as the African Mahler. And in fact, his biography is titled Black Mahler and is written by someone named Charles Elford. He died really young, age 37, and this Hiawatha piece is his most famous piece, but if you want to give him a first listen, I would recommend a piece called Ballade for Orchestra. So, yeah, he was born August 15th, 1875.
Oh,
good one.
Yeah. Another birth date today is Leon Theremin. Of course, we all know who Leon Theremin is, I think.
I can guess.
You can give us your best guess, Caleb.
I'm gonna guess that he made the theremin.
You nailed it. Yeah. So I think we mostly know that, but I was going to add just a few cool facts about Leon Theremin. So he's a Russian Soviet inventor, most famous, of course, for his invention of the theremin, which is one of the first electronic musical instruments and the first to be mass-produced. If you don't know what the theremin is, please YouTube it. It's really, really cool and guaranteed to blow your mind if you've never seen one. He also devised something called interlace technique, which improved the quality of video signals. So if you've had any really pre-digital television, it probably used what's called interlacing technology, which is just like how it's presented to make a smoother frame rate. And it's a way that the screen can appear that will kind of trick our eye into making the image look smoother, I guess. It's pretty complicated, but if you look up interlace technique, there's, of course, plenty of information out there. What else? He invented a listening device called The Thing, which hung for 7 years in plain view in the United States Ambassador Moscow office and enabled Soviet agents to eavesdrop on secret conversations. I believe I reported on this thing a while ago when we talked about Theremin, but inside the big emblem, like the U.S. Embassy emblem, like the big wooden thing, which was a gift from the Soviets, he had invented this listening device, basically one of the first bugs ever that the Soviets would spy. Sorry?
No, that's interesting. It's a hot button topic,
I know.
right? It's a bit of a hot button topic right now.
I was going to say, right now, it's like all this Russian news and everything that's going on. One more Russian bit. In 1915, an amateur piano teacher by the name of Sofia Shostakovich. Anyone want to guess whose mom that is?
Mahler's?
Bruckner's mom. Yeah. No, Sofia Shostakovich, aware of her son's wonderful talent. At 8 years old, she takes son Dmitri to audition for a famous piano teacher named Ignatiy Glacier. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, in Petrograd. And Dmitri begins an introductory course given by this pianist's wife named Olga, and he finishes the 1-year course in 6 months because he's freaking Dmitri Shostakovich. And cruising right along in 1965, Harry Partch, at age 64, signs a lease for a former laundromat in Venice, California, where he will create a studio to compose and perform, etc. And the last one I want to say is in 2001, composer and accordionist Pauline Oliveros. So I bet some of our listeners have heard of. I think Brian.
Awesome music.
Yeah, a lot of us have heard of her, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, at age 69, she's appointed a distinguished researcher professor at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. She is especially known for her contributions to experimental and post-war electronic art music, and her progressive thoughts, authorship, and investigations into focused attention on music, including her concept of what she calls deep listening and sonic awareness. So she has a TED Talk out there. She has interviews out there you can listen to. But yeah, just huge steps and strides in electronic things, and especially improvisation and what she calls deep listening and sonic awareness. And John Cage even has a quote saying, "Through Pauline Oliveros and deep listening, I now know what harmony is. It's all about the pleasure of music making." So anyway, a lot of cool stuff happened August 15th.
There you go.
Cool.
Nice.
Very nice.
Cool. Hey, does anyone have anything else? I'll probably make 2 parts out of this.
Yeah, I've got a little plug just because I just found it. I had to drive to PA 3 times this past week, so it's a 5-hour round trip. But I just found, have y'all heard of Decomposed, Jade Simmons' podcast?
No.
So she does, it's almost, and she hasn't uploaded in a while, so it might be over. I'm not really sure. But she does, it's almost like an NPR storyboard type thing. That's kind of the feel of it. But she does basically not long form, 30 to 50 minute stories of composers, but she tells it in like how you would hear like a Discovery documentary.
Mm-hmm.
So I listened to the one on Shostakovich, and she did Symphony 7, but she talked basically through his career and the symphony and how the tape or the score got lost and then was found and went on microfilm, and how it moved around the world and all the history behind it. But I listened to all of hers, and that was probably some of the most interesting music history. It's definitely focused more on like the socio-political side and his personal life, and she's got Clara Schumann and lots of others, but definitely would recommend doing that.
This is by Jade Simmons.
Jade Simmons, Decomposed.
Subscribe. Yep, just found it. Subscribe. Perfect.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Hey, well, you guys, thanks so much for joining. Brian Nosny, Brian Bloom was here. Ben Charles was here. Rebecca Kite, thanks so much. Marco Shrippa and Caleb Pickering. It's good to see you all. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's great. It was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Cool.
great talking.
Okay, everybody, we will catch you on next time, and have a good afternoon or evening or whatever it is. Take it easy.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
See you.